Okay, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a great review for you from the brand Omega. Now, although Omega is a huge brand I shouldn't have to tell you too much about, this is actually the first Omega that will be reviewed on this channel, thanks to Belmont Watches, so I did want to give them a huge shout out. Now, a little bit about the brand. Omega was founded back in 1848. They are Swiss made, and they are part of the Swatch Group, and they're within that luxury tier. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you think about the Swatch Group is that Omega and Tissot merging was kind of the precursor to what eventually became the Swatch Group. So I would say that their history is more pure than maybe some of the other brands that are in there that were kind of, going out of business because of the court crisis. The quartz crisis, brands like Hamilton, Certina, Mito, even Longines, a lot of those brands, because of the quartz crisis, pretty much all scaled down and, kind of got their names saved a little bit more so. And they were more of the bus riders versus the bus drivers, where I will say that Omega and Tissot, specifically Omega being kind of that luxury tier and then Tissot being that kind of high volume entry level tier, are really what helped keep everything afloat. So something to think about. I know, when you think about the Swatch Group, sometimes it can be a bit of a turnoff because of, ETA kind of doing all the movements and everything like that. But I will say that Omega is one of those brands that is, although it falls underneath the Swatch Group, it is a little bit different in terms of, kind of where it stands. And I think that's something that most people understand. But for those of you that are kind of going through your watch journey, it is something that I did want to mention kind of in this intro. This is the Seamaster Boutique Edition for New York, and it basically celebrates the history and famous architecture of New York. Omega was really proud to introduce this Seamaster exclusive boutique New York edition. And it's really clean, and I will say that this has probably got to be one of the biggest sleepers that are out there in terms of a very nice, high spec, very desirable, and quite limited watch. So with that said, let's zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so as you can see, wow. I mean, look at that dial. These actually go for about 7,600 retail. There was only 399 of them made, and then they're actually sold out currently, but you can get them at Belmont Watch. Belmont Watches, you can actually get this particular one for $87.50, which I think is quite good from that perspective, considering they're really hard to get in terms of the case dimensions. This is a 39.3 by 11.7 thick, and then and I know some of you might be thinking 11.7 sounds a little bit thick, but if you look at it, I really love the way that they balanced the case back and the bezel and crystal on this one. So, if you just look visually, that mid case itself is only 4.7 millimeters thick. So this is going to wear extremely thin. And it's only 44.1 millimeters lug to lug. It is, of course, done in stainless steel, brushed with these beautiful polished accents here. And on the other side of the case, which I'm going to try not to show you, it actually has an engraving that shows the limited model number on there, like from the edition, like which one out of 399 that this is. But I noticed on Belmont's site, they kind of blank that out, so I figured I'll try to avoid showing you that if that's something that is detrimental to resale or something like that. So wow, look at the way this thing just catches the light. I love this really mocha effect there. The gradation that's on it is really quite handsome. This crystal has this great kind of vintage dome to it, not quite box domed, a little bit softer, but I think that actually helps it flow really well. And you can see you're going to get a nice bit of play and distortion at harsher angles there. But I mean, this is definitely a timepiece that isn't, you don't buy this because you want to be timing sports events or something like that. Although this is highly accurate because, as you can see, it is a master chronometer. So it's only 0 to +6 seconds, which is awesome. That's even better than chronometer certified. So this Meta cert is really great. That's also anti-magnetic, up to 15,000 Gauss. And with that, check this out. Movement outstanding. Look at the little skyline there that goes all the way around that ring. I think it's really, really handsome. That boutique edition, limited, very, very nice. You can also see the strap here. It's a little worn in, but I think it's very luxurious and definitely is quite handsome. You can see the tang buckle here, high polished, fully milled, just like you would expect. Really quite beautiful. The movement, let's get back to it, because I mean, come on, this thing's outstanding. I'll try to let the camera just really soak in. Wow, the level there, really, really awesome. So this is the automatic Omega 8800 movement, and like I mentioned, it's a master chronometer. It's also anti-magnetic, and this nice little case back really gets to highlight that. And one thing that a lot of people don't necessarily mention when it comes to these movements is that they are slightly lower beat. Not quite a 3 hertz, not quite a 4 hertz. It's somewhere in between. So instead of it being 8 or 6 seconds, or I should say 8 or 6 ticks a second, it's going to be 7 ticks a second. So, most people, the naked eye, are not really going to notice that or see that. A lot of people, will be able to say, oh, I can tell the difference between a 4 hertz and a 3 hertz movement. But seeing the difference between this one here, I think you'll be having a lot more trouble trying to decipher that. And then that is pretty standard for modern Omega movements as well. Now this dial is a beautifully domed dial, and it actually, let me get it at an angle so you guys can get an idea of just the depth there. My goodness. So it is lacquered with a mocha gradient. It actually has 18 karat white gold hands, logo, and indices, and then color match date wheel at 6 o'clock. And of course there's no loom here, so we won't be doing any loom shots, but we can definitely get some low light transitions so you guys can get an idea of what this renders like. I'm blown away that I didn't even know this model existed, but thanks to Belmont Watches, they put it on my radar, and I have to thank them because this is just such a handsome piece. It's water resistant to 6 bar or 60 meters, so you can get your splash on from that perspective. As long as the crown is down, you should be good to go. 20 millimeter lugs, which is great, and then it does taper to 16 millimeters, so it does wear quite nicely. Speaking of wearing nicely, let's get it on the wrist and see how it wears. All right, as you guys can see on my 7 1/4 to 7 1/2 inch wrist, this looks really quite immaculate. Those shorter lugs with the kind of stubby nature, but they're still a little bit wide, which is great. So it does help the watch wear really well. And I think that gradient on the dial also helps kind of shrink down some of the visual weight versus kind of an all dial setup. But you can see this thing is just gorgeous. Look at the transition on the high polished and the fine brushing on the lugs. Really, really nice. You can see the signed crown, not a screw down crown, but man, very, very, very handsome. I almost think maybe some gilt action would really make this piece pop. But again, each one of these dial color combinations is tied to a particular boutique. So for New York, this is the choice that they made. And yeah, man, it is a fine one. Look at how flat it lays. Look at it kind of on the wrist. I wear, dress watches typically a little bit higher on the wrist, so it's going to be kind of on the thicker part of my wrist. That's why I'll say in between 7.25 and 7.5, because I'll probably be closer to 7.25 the closer I get to the wrist bone. But then when I'm above it, it's going to wear, my wrist is a little bit bigger, because as you can see, although it might taper this direction, it tapers, it expands that direction the higher you go up on the wrist bone. So wow, this is a looker. I mean, definitely outside of what I'd be purchasing for a dress watch, just because I'm not a super dress watchy kind of guy. But I gotta say, it has its charm. I can absolutely see, why folks would sign up for something like this, especially with its limited and very unique nature. So with that said, let's go ahead and set up for some lume shots. Low light transition. Oh, did I say lume shots? Just low light transition and closing thoughts. All right, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Okay, as you can see, no lume, but I do want to show you what this will look like in less than optimal lighting, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you'll be coming in and out, indoors, walking underneath overhangs, the shade of a tree, or maybe just spending time in your favorite automobile. So a lot of your time is going to be spent in less than optimal lighting, to include maybe some harsh lighting conditions here, very high contrast, where you would typically reveal any type of production defects in the finish. But you can see, man, the way the light very evenly and uniformly just flows over this piece just speaks to the quality in the fit and the finish there. Really quite handsome, and I love the way that the center of that dial just soaks in the light. Whenever there's a little bit of light, it tries and it keeps it, and somehow you can still read it, which is pretty outstanding considering the fact that there's no lume. So I really like that. And ultimately at the end of the day, these are time keepers and time pieces, so it's good to have something that can keep the time. So closing thoughts, guys. On the wrist, it lays really flat, very, very nice. It's super well balanced. That gradient dial does help shrink kind of that all dial layout to kind of balance the visual weight. And then the physical weight is a really nice balance. A little bit on the larger side for a dressy watch at 39 millimeters, but it is nice and stubby, so it's it's not overly large. I would just consider it more of kind of a full-size dress watch. In terms of model variations, there's different color combos that tie into each boutique that they represent. So definitely check online, probably the Omega website, if you want to find out more on some of the other options. But in terms of this option, definitely check the link in the description. Again, huge shout out to Belmont Watches. They're a local dealer here in San Diego. I went over to their showroom. Very cool stand-up guys. Really great to be kind of collaborating with them and sharing some of the stuff I find interesting that are that they currently have in stock. They have a range of new things, vintage items, and yeah, at the end of the day, they're a couple of enthusiasts, and that's always a great thing. So even apart from micro brands, where I'm meeting with enthusiasts and everything all the time, it's great even to find some of these smaller dealers that are out there that are enthusiast run, and even taking a look at something as mainstream as Omega to still be able to find a little gem out there in a timepiece like this is a lot of fun. I love that this one is just it's a total sleeper. It's handsome, it's desirable, and it also happens to fly well underneath the radar of your typical kind of Instagram fueled watch addict. So it has a lot going for it. In terms of like what I'd compare it to, it's tough. I'm not huge into dress watches. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you think this would compare well to. But other than that, guys, if you like the video, please do it like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.